The following episode of Big Little Small Talk may contain content that is not suitable for all audiences.
Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome listeners to Big Little Small Talk. I met a lady just recently and the minute I laid eyes on her, I knew that I wanted to interview her for Big Little Small Talk. She was wearing an enormous pink hat, beautiful flouncy clothes, about 3-inch heels, long, beautifully tailored fingernails, and lovely lipstick. And as I got to know her more, it confirmed that I did need to have Velvet Amour on my show. Welcome to Big Little Small Talk, Velvet.
Hello, Megan. Thank you.
Velvet, who's born with the name Velvet Amour?
Not many people. Haven't found one yet.
Tell me the history. Is that your christened name?
Yes, I wasn't christened, but that is my Christian name is Velvet, and that was my given name because my woman had, I think because my mother had an affair, really, and that was sort of where it came into play.
So why Velvet though? What?
I think she knew she'd only have one child, so I think she'd been hankering for a child for about 7 years. So I think she wanted something special. She wanted some sort of special name.
And what about Amour? Like it's a name that you were born to be almost. It was a portent for what happened in your life. But yes. So where
I chose Amour. So that wasn't my surname. So I chose Amour to go with Velvet. And
it does perfectly. Where did you grow up, Velvet?
I grew up on farms in Western Australia with my mother and a very nasty stepfather.
And did you have any brothers and sisters then?
No.
Right. And did you spend very much time on your own as a child?
All the time on my own because my father was always chasing me around, my stepfather, and my mother got quite nasty about that, but she took it out on me. So I didn't have a happy childhood. So I really was in the bush most of the time talking to the animals.
Right. And your sort of imagination running wild. And what did Velvet Amour want to be when she was a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old?
She wanted to be a model.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do that when I first started into the big wide world of grown-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And did a few commercials and did some modelling. But I was also dancing at night, dancing and modelling in the day, and it was a bit much because I had children. So I had to give up one, and I gave up the modelling.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just go back to you grew up, and I gather from what you've said that your stepfather wasn't a nice person. So you finished school, and what happened after that?
I finished school. Well, I didn't really finish school, Megan. A shearer came to the farm to shear sheep, and we took a liking to one another, and in a 3-second romp, I got pregnant.
Right. At what age were you then?
15.
Oh, gosh. Right.
I had my baby at 16. My parents were very, very fanatical religious people. And, of course, they threw us into a registry office and we had to be married.
And what happened from there?
I can't say we were together for 4 years because we weren't. He just went off shooting kangaroos, and he was 17 and he didn't have a clue either. So he went off shooting kangaroos for weeks at a time, and I took a job in a motel with the children to cook breakfast so that I could feed us
And so you got married and you were together for 4 years. Did you have more children with
I had 2 children to him.
with this husband?
Yes. And we weren't together really because we were for 4 years, but we were married for 4 years, yes.
And what happened at the end of that relationship? I won't say romance.
Thank you. I started dancing at a nightclub. I was asked to dance at a nightclub that was opening in this town of Albany in Western Australia. And I danced a few weekends, and then a big bearded man who looked like Father Christmas arrived from Perth for some reason in Albany, and he loved my show, and he invited me to come to Perth and dance in his fabulous club. And I took off real quick.
With the children?
Yes.
Yeah. And what age were they now, Velvet?
My son was 4 and my daughter was 8 months.
Right. And so you would have been, what, 17 at this stage? Or?
My daughter was born when I was 20, so I was 20. Yeah.
Okay. What sort of dancing are we talking?
Well, first of all, it was me not crawling, good heavens no, slithering out of a cane basket like a snake, wearing the Dance of the Seven Veils, and that I'd made specially for this occasion, and doing the Dance of the Seven Veils. So that's how everything started. But when I went to the Big Smoke for the first time, and worked for my big Father Christmas man, he said, "You have to take your bra off." I said, "What?" No, I couldn't do that. But I knew I had to feed myself and the children, so I did. And that's where it went from there. And I worked there for years at the La Riviera nightclub.
What sort of patronage are we talking? Was it creepy or...
Oh, no. There were couples. It was all couples. And it was very tasteful. And they all really, really loved the show. I had a great following. And from that, I got work all over the city. And then I got a contract in Melbourne, and then contracts started coming in all the time. So I travelled around the world.
So it's burlesque dancing, isn't it?
It's burlesque,
yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Not the burlesque that you see today. The resurgence of burlesque you see today is completely different. Back in the 70s and 80s, and probably beginning of the 90s, burlesque was a profession, a career. You didn't do it for fun, you did it for money, and big money. You had to be perfect. You had to have a perfect body, and you had to have perfect grooming. So the one who took best care of oneself is the one that got most of the money.
Were you working as a single dancer, or were you part of a troupe?
I worked as a single dancer for many years, and then when I went to work in Sydney, I realised that I needed to do more, because it wasn't a 20-minute act in Sydney, it was a 1-hour act. And that was a bit of a test. So I spent many, many months learning to sing with a singing teacher. And so then I started doing cabaret. So I could do 1-hour acts. So I was doing cabaret, comedy and burlesque.
Comedy as well? What
yes.
sort of joke telling were you doing?
Well, stories really, because we don't do jokes much anymore. We do stories. And yeah, that went really, really well.
At this stage, how did you manage with the children? What did you do? Did you hire babysitters and
Yes.
things? Did you?
Yes.
Right. And what sort of world was that for a single mum? Like, was that really hard, and faced a lot of discrimination, or?
No.
It was just in that world, that arts entertainment world, there was a lot of people in a similar sort of situation?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really get faced with much discrimination because I didn't mix with those types. I just went to work, did my shows all over, one after the other in town, and then around about 3 a.m, you'd toddle off home and go to bed.
And would you get up in the morning and have to make the lunches for the kids to go off to school?
Look, this is a terrible story, but I trained them to do their own thing. Yeah, so they weren't allowed to make any noise. They were terrified of waking up Mother, and they got their own breakfast and took themselves to school.
Yeah. Where did you get the title Queen of Burlesque?
Well, from the public, really, because I was the best at my field, and I was the one most wanted to do shows. And the public called me the Queen of Burlesque because they knew I was the best at what I did.
I just can't imagine in sleepy WA in the 70s having a big burlesque scene.
Oh, it was huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge.
Right. Is that because there was a lot of money there? With mining and agriculture?
There was huge money there then. And not only was there a lot of money there, but this was the times when there was always businessmen's luncheons. So doing businesses, luncheons in hotels constantly. You do 4 or 5 at lunchtime between 12 and 2:30. So you just fly from one gig to the next. And then you'd work at night in the nightclubs.
And what about the title Miss Body Beautiful Australia? I suppose that might have come from the same sort of place, did it?
It did,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it came from the same place.
From the audience?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
right. So tell me about going overseas with your career then.
Well, once I started to go east, when I went to Melbourne, I kept getting more and more contracts. So I got a contract to Hong Kong and Japan, and then there came a point in my life when I was about 40, and I was about to give up burlesque. And burlesque had died by that time. They'd opened up strip clubs. There really wasn't any burlesque venues where you did big performances on stage anymore. So I went to Egypt singing, and I met 2 Turkish ladies who were belly dancers, and they taught me to belly dance. So I came back to Australia and opened up a school. And my school was big. It was at the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, Logan Village. I had, a big school for a long time. And I taught belly dance, which is just divine.
Good fun, people having good fun.
Absolutely good fun. Yeah. And I found out through that I was a damn good teacher.
Right. And had you at any stage been sort of approached by television or lured into that world? Is that
Yes.
the beginning of television and things?
Well, I was, but that was before I got into belly dancing. I did a few skits on TV and things, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
Why was that? You just didn't have the audience right there in front of you?
No, it wasn't that. It was that the men couldn't behave themselves.
In the television world? Really interesting.
And in the modelling world too. That was one of the reasons why I got out of modelling. They couldn't behave themselves.
Right. You had much more sort of autonomy and control over your life when you were a dancer.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
On the stage, and then I'd go to the next gig, or I'd go home. So in the back door, up the back stairs of clubs, into the dressing room, then you do your show, and then you go back into the dressing room and you leave. So a lot of control.
Yeah. Thinking about that world for me, like, it's all the sort of smoky and, the underworld characters. Was there much of that or not really?
No, not then.
No.
No, not then.
No. Didn't feel sort of like you were, living a dangerous life, or it was just something that you were really used to, I suppose?
Well, it was a dangerous life because there were quite a few things happen that were dangerous. So it was a dangerous life, but that comes with the territory.
And what did you love about that show business world?
I love, look, this is a terrible thing to say, but I love the adoration from the public. It's naughty, isn't it?
I don't know that that's a terrible thing to say. Why is that being honest and just, you know?
I did. I love the adoration. I love the adrenaline buzz that you get when the curtain goes up. It's phenomenal. And when I retired from burlesque and also retired from belly dancing, I found it very hard. And I constantly used to dream that I was still on the stage.
Do you still dream that?
Every now and then.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just remind the listeners that they're on 102.7 FM and we're talking to, well, I guess your title is Successful Psychic and Astrologer now, former burlesque dancer, and so I want to talk to you about that in a minute. But where I wanted to go now, Velvet, is about your marriages. Now, you are engaged for the...
Number 6 time. Oh dear, sounds terrible when you say it out loud.
You never thought about it before. Tell me, do you mind telling me the series of how we got to number 6?
Well, I swim every day at Millen Bay Pool. I do a kilometre at least every day because I love to keep fit and always have. And I used to always go at night, and so I didn't run into the children everywhere. And I started going in the afternoons this year, and a man came up to me and made comment that I looked lovely or something or other, and I dismissed him very quickly, thinking, oh dear, because I had been on my own for 35 years and I was loving it. However, I will point out that in my astrology, which I keep a very close eye on, it did say to me that I was going to meet and have a romantic relationship, and I thought, well, I won't be letting that happen.
That's not happening.
And yes, he was there every afternoon and he said hello to me every afternoon, and then my little sports car needed a new engine. He followed me, well, he didn't follow me, he went out with me out of the pool one day and said, oh, lovely car. Well, she's smoking a bit. And he said, oh. I said, but it's $11,000 to do the motor. I've talked to 20 mechanics here, there and everywhere. And he said, oh, I know someone who'll probably do it better than that. So we went to meet this mechanic friend of his who was nowhere near that amount of money. And while I'm talking to the mechanic, this beautiful man pipes up and says, you can have my other car while this is being done. Now, I've really not had men do anything much for me in my life. And I was aghast. I thought, has he got wings?
Or horns?
Well, just from the country, very laid back, very quiet, totally different to anything I've ever experienced before as a city girl. And slowly things started to happen.
Right. So how would you describe, you said you've never had men sort of look after you, or
never.
Would you say not be kind to you, Velvet, or what?
Yeah, probably not be kind.
And we won't be breaking any confidences if you tell me what type of person your fiancé number 6 is. Is he someone who has similar sort of interests and things to you?
In a way, as it turns out, because he swims every day, I swim every day. We love our swimming. We wouldn't be able to survive without it. And then he actually got me through saying to me one day at the pool, I dance every week. Would you be interested in dancing? I do ballroom dancing. Well, my eyes started to sparkle then because, you see, I'd retired. So I thought, oh, I can dance again. So he invited me to come to the dance, and I said, I'll see you there, and I didn't show up. He invited me again, and I didn't show up. At the pool, he told me where the next dance was, and I didn't show up. And the fourth time, I decided I would. So I turned up at the dance. And
So had you always planned to go, or what was the circumstance of you going that fourth time?
No, I hadn't planned to go. I had my grandson with me, who's 14. He was staying the weekend, and I was a bit bored, and it was about 9:30 at night at this point. And I thought, oh, well, what can we do? Oh, I remember there's a dance on. So I said to my grandson, hey, let's go dancing. So he said, oh, okay, whatever. So we jumped in the car with our finery on and off we went. And at the door, within split second, was my beautiful man. The attentiveness was incredible.
Imagine all those times, those 3 previous times where he'd watched the door the whole time to see whether you were going to come in, and then that fourth time you turned up.
I think he did, because after that first time, he was always at the front waiting for me.
So you started going out, and so do you think he was, would he have been a tiny bit gun shy that you'd been married 5 times before?
I don't think it's registered.
You have told him, Velvet, haven't you?
Well, no, I don't think I have, actually. I don't think I have. But he bought a book. So one of my books that I've written, and I assumed for a while that he'd read the book. I've only found out recently that he didn't read the book at all. So maybe he has no clue. I might have to address that after this.
Well, if your fiancé, number 6, is finding out via the radio today, that might be a bit of a rude shock. You said that you've written a book. I think it's called My Bear Lady, which is kind of cute.
Yes.
Tell me about the circumstances of writing a book.
I had so many people say to me since I was about 30, oh, my goodness, you've got to write a book. And I just say, don't be ridiculous. I don't want anyone to know my ins and outs. And then I got to a certain time in my life where it kept on happening. These people would keep on. And I thought, oh, look, you could make lots of money. You could go bestseller. And I thought, make lots of money. I spent 7 years writing this book. It was torture.
Did you have anyone helping you, an editor or a publisher, or what were you going to do, self-publish?
I self-published, yes. I did go through 3 editors, and they were all dreadful. And sort of came to a sticky end. So in the end, my son, who at the time was studying law at university, he ended up editing it for me. So yes, I'd spent a lot of money on editors, but it's a minefield out there.
We've had a couple of people who've written books on Big Little Small Talk and either self-published. Where is your book available through?
My website, velvetamour.com.au.
That's a free plug for you.
Yeah.
So in your book, I think you make reference to addiction and alcohol, murder and molestation. Can we touch on any of that, addiction and alcohol?
Sure. That is the other thing that my fiancé and I have in common. He was an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic. I think really we gave up drinking around about the same time, but we didn't know one another then. And so we have a lot of those things in common. It's very easy to become a heavy drinker, and it gets out of hand when you're in show business. Things like I'd do a show, and fans of mine who would follow me everywhere when I was in Sydney, you'd find that there'd be a bucket of French champagne sent to the dressing room. So I'd always go out into the room to have a drink with them, with and things like that. So, and there was always more and more French champagne.
And it sort of just crept up on you, did you think?
Absolutely.
And tell me about the decision to give it away and how hard that was. What you said, you've always loved to keep fit. You've always swimming, so you're always swimming.
Yes.
Even when you were sort of waking up in a, would you be terribly hungover, or you just felt that? No,
I wasn't terribly hungover. I don't know why.
Well, this is a bit rude just now, but it's called being piss fit, I think.
Oh,
Velvet.
darling, yes, that's what it is.
That's what it is. So, what was it? What made you get to the point where you said, "I have to give it away"?
I found that I wasn't in control of myself, and I'd gone too far a few times, and that scared me. And I thought, "You've got a big problem, girl." So I just cut it out completely. Never drank again.
Right. And was that a difficult decision for you, or you were fine?
It wasn't a difficult decision, Megan, but what it was hard to do. Really, really hard to do. I couldn't sleep for years. It was really difficult. I really want to have a drink. And if anything happened in my life that was not very nice, I have to have a bottle, and I couldn't do that anymore. I had to face my demons.
Were you still performing at that time?
At that particular time, I was living on the Sunshine Coast, and I had opened up a business called Comedygrams, and I was doing comedy for restaurants and parties and home parties when someone would turn 40 or 50 or 60 or 70. And I was doing impersonations, if you like. I do I do a tribute to Marilyn Monroe, all dressed like Marilyn Monroe. And of course I'd sing as well, and throw a bit of comedy in and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so I just wondered whether whether you used to have a drink before you went on, to a job to give you a little bit of Dutch courage and all of that, and then did that, having that taken away, were you still able to?
Look, by that time I was 40, and I could perform standing on my head. Pardon me, pun. But when I first began dancing, and they said you have to take your bra off, yes, I had to have a drink beforehand. And that's really how it started, because I was 22 then, and I'd never ever had a drink in my life.
Right. Can you tell me, I want to talk to you, Velvet, about, and not in a joking way, about, you said you'd been on your own since you were about 35, was that right? Until you met this fiancé?
Yes, yes.
So how did we go from 15 to 35 and 5 marriages, and how many children did you end up having?
3.
3, okay. Can you talk me through some of that?
Well, where do I start with this? Okay. My last husband, and that's the trouble, you meet them at the show, and yes, that's where it all goes wrong in the beginning, I would say. Turned out to be a fraudster. That I didn't know this, and I wanted to have a baby, and I had him at 38 years of age. He's 37 now, and
quick maths there, guys. Not for me, but for someone smart enough.
oops. And we were married for 17 months, and I never ever loved him. I didn't love some of my husbands at all, but I didn't love him. But he felt so insecure that he said, "Please marry me, and I'll feel secure then." So I gave in like a fool and did. And after 17 months, and he was an alcoholic too, it just didn't work, and he was ripping me off financially because he didn't work, and a lot of my husbands didn't work. They lived off me, and that's part and parcel that goes on too in show business. And so I wanted us to go our separate ways. So I sat down at dinner one night and explained that it wasn't working for me. Let's share the child and live close by. And he went ballistic and tried to kill me and the baby and went to prison, and it was pretty ugly. And after that, I had been cured.
So that marriage lasted for 14 months?
Yes.
Yeah. Was that your shortest marriage?
Oh, no.
Okay, well, let's work backwards then. So that was number 5. Can we talk about number 4?
Number 4, I was married to him for 4 years. We married because I think I needed a companion on the shows. We travelled all over the world. I took him with me everywhere. And number 3, I was 28 when I married number 3. I really didn't know anything about alcoholism. I didn't know. I was a drinker, but I didn't know what an alcoholic really was. I don't think a lot of people do, really, because there's all different stages of alcoholism. And he was 20 years older than me. I'd known him 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Yes. And I'd only been to dinner with him every night for 3 weeks. And then I had a contract to fly to Hong Kong to do 6 months contract. So he knew I was going, so I picked up the children. He asked me not to go the night before I flew out. I said I have to. Picked up the children, caught a plane, and off we went. We'd been gone 2 weeks, and he arrived with a diamond ring and said, "Please marry me." And he looked like Clark Gable. He did. He looked and he was a dresser. Yes, he stopped traffic. And so we looked pretty good together. And look, I was swept completely off my feet. I loved him. Michael was his name. I loved him to pieces. So I came back to Australia, broke my contract and married him. And I was married to him for 3 weeks and realised that I was married to a man who had bourbon at 7 o'clock in the morning and didn't stop until he passed out at night. And I went, holy moly, what have I done? And also there was more. He wanted me all of a sudden to give up my career, which I was in the height of at the time. I made more money than he did, and he was the only one who didn't live off me. He had a business. That didn't sit well with him because he was older. He wanted to redress me in old lady clothes that I don't even wear today. And I had to run away.
Right. Okay. Number 2?
Number 2, he was an Italian man, and good looking and charming. And I'd been married to him for 5 days, and I came home one day unexpectedly in the afternoon, and he was in bed going for it with his work colleague.
Right. So that was the end of that one.
That was the end of that one.
And how did number 1 end?
Well, I see, we were both very, very young. I didn't know what love was at 15. He didn't at 17. It was the first time in the cot for me, and I thought, oh, that's not very nice and charming. That's awful. So our honeymoon was the worst nights of my whole life, I've got to say.
Can you tell me about that?
Oh, well, he was 17. He wanted to do it all the time, and I didn't want to ever do it again.
There it is.
Yeah. So that wasn't what you'd call even a marriage, but no.
Was it an amicable split, or did you have any drama surrounding the breakup there?
Lots of drama, I'm afraid. Yes, my daughter was born from rape, from him coming back from the bush and me having made the decision that I've had enough, and she was born from rape.
Right.
So after that had happened, I couldn't deal with that anymore. That was pretty awful. And I had my daughter, and had nothing to do with him after that.
Mm. All the time, you were having this quite big highs and big lows. Big highs in your career and big lows in your relationships. Some highs, some lows. Did you have any contact with your parents?
Not a lot, because they were fanatical religious people, a cult really, and that was, I was just grateful that I was out of the house and away from the religion, because it was all consuming and it was dreadful, a dreadful childhood, mainly because my mother had an affair and my real father had a mop of blonde curly hair, and I ended up having a mop of curly blonde hair. And my stepfather, she went back to her marriage, and my stepfather had a constant reminder, so he hated me on one hand, but he molested me on another from the age of 6. So that was nasty. And my mother, unfortunately, hated me because she felt that he was interested in me and not her, I think. So I didn't have much to do with them at all.
Just didn't. That's a terrible, terrible story, Velvet. And probably more common than we think.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So on to happier times then. The children, what are they doing now?
Well, my eldest son is in Western Australia, in Albany, in the country there, and he's a farrier, so he's a rodeo rider, so he's into that. And my daughter is in Western Australia, way down south too, in a really tiny little bush town, and she loves that. And she works in a supermarket, and we're in constant contact. And my youngest son is here in Toowoomba, and that's how I ended up in Toowoomba, because he came to Toowoomba with the grandchildren. And as it turned out, I met the love of my life. So isn't that astounding?
It's a roundabout way of getting here.
I would never have come to Toowoomba, I don't think. I'm a city girl.
Yeah. How do you find living here?
I love it, particularly now that I'm in the dancing, ballroom dancing, because we can dance 4 nights a week if we want. And on every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we dance at the Senior Citizens. And there's this wonderful woman called Ray Blinko, and she plays this machine, and it's just like a huge band. And she's a darling, and we dance our feet away. And on Saturday nights, we go to all the different dances all around the countryside. And I'm back into dancing, and we dance every dance, and he's magnificent to dance with. And by the way, when I first started dancing with him, I hadn't done ballroom since I was 16. And it's all a bit different now.
In what way? Why is it different?
Oh, the dances are different. They've made them more voguey and flowery and fabulous, and I was all over the place. I had 2 left feet, and he was so patient with me. And for a couple of months, he just guided me around and taught me how to dance again. He was amazing at this. A beautiful dancer. And now I can dance, and we're so good together.
Yeah, so you really feel that you're a good dancing couple together.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And had your fiancé ever been married before?
Never.
Right.
He's been a country boy, and he's had lots and lots and lots of girlfriends. And
are you a similar sort of age?
He's younger than me.
That's as far as we'll go.
That's
with that
as far as
line
we'll
of
go.
questioning.
Thank you. Yes, you could
What
tell.
about you obviously love your dress. You know, you're very theatrical with your dress. Do you when you go to these dances, like, do you dress similarly to your partner? Do you have sort of like a show type of outfit together, or not really?
Well, he dresses very well when we dance, and he's got lovely clothes. I get to dress up in all my fabulous gear that I've had in the cupboard for so long, and it's just lovely. I'm just able to get back into my beautiful gowns.
You've still got all your gowns from the dancing burlesque days?
No, not really, because they're all way over the top and huge feather headdresses and stuff like that. So no. But I always was. I've always been a dresser who would always show up at my shows dressed the way I dress, and so I had lots of beautiful things.
So just in the little bit of time that we've got left, tell me about being a psychic. Did you always know that you were psychic?
Not really. I was about 10 when I used to sit on the wood heap a lot on the farm and look at the stars and talk to the stars, really, because I love the evenings. I love night time, and still do. And it came from there, where I found that being so alone in life is when you're able to tap into these things. And I'd get messages, and my mother would always tell me that I was possessed by the devil because of her religion. And then when I gave up burlesque, and I decided that I'd get back into it, and I started to take courses in astrology, because I do love astrology, not astronomy so much, but astrology. And I learnt so much about myself through astrology.
Tell me about that. Like, what do you mean?
Well, I get people to tell me their birth date and time. Time of birth is so important, and from that I can get their own personal chart up, so that way I know where all the planets are and what they're doing to them. So it's absolutely fascinating.
What's your star sign, Velvet?
I'm a Leo, of course.
A Leo, of course. And what are the sort of what's the scary part or the pitfalls about being a psychic? You know,
There aren't any.
Yeah.
There really aren't any.
What happens if you see something bad in someone's future? How do you handle that?
Very carefully. For instance, I had a fellow working for me when I had the Comedy-grams on the Sunshine Coast, and I had he came around to pick up the poem, because I do a poem about the birthday person, to pick up his poem, and off he went to Gympie to do this job. And I rang him and said, Russell, I want you to be so careful. I've got a feeling that you need to be very careful. Someone could stab you in the back. And he went crook at me because he doesn't believe in it. And I said, I know, but I just had to say this to you. And I said, it could be not physically, it could be another way, but be careful, please. That night, he finished his gig in Gympie. He went back to Maroochydore with his girlfriend, and they parked in this place and went to sleep in their combi van. Her ex-husband arrived, opened the door, and stabbed Russell to death. 32 stab wounds.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, see how that can happen?
But I suppose for him, how more careful could he have been, I guess, but it was just something that you,
It's interesting you say that, because I've had a lot of cases like this now, because I've been doing it 30 years now, and every time when it's that bad, it can't be avoided. I had a mechanic who used to come to the house and fix my cars, and he said to me, one day, would you do a reading for me, a chart for me, because I've got a few problems. And I said, well, don't tell me what they are. I'll have a look at it. So we did that, and I said to him, there's a lot of violence that's coming to you around June on this particular year. I want you to be very, very careful in June. There's violence all around you. He was a bit of a hippie guy who would play guitar in different places in the country. And I said, don't pick up any hitchhikers, because that's the sort of thing you do. It's a stranger. I know it's a stranger, and he could really hurt you. In June of that year, he was shot by his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. They were both shot, actually, in Newdlow. So I've come to realise that it cannot be avoided. I did a reading for a lady in Stanthorpe a couple of years ago, who came up from Stanthorpe, and the reading was fine, but just before we left, I said, I have to tell you that you have to get your sister to a doctor. She said, why? How do you know I had a sister? I said, well, I do know, and it's serious, and she must go to a doctor, and you must tell her. And she called me a few weeks later and said, I made my sister go to the doctor, and she has cancer.
Gosh, yeah. Well, I think there's something out there to everyone's different degrees of disbelieving or believing. There's got to be something. It is so interesting.
It is interesting, yes.
Now, just in our dying moments, Velvet, I don't know whether you'd be into the royals. Are you a follower of the royals? It's almost like show business, the royals, isn't it? Watching
I think
a royal.
it is these days, indeed.
These days.
Indeed.
Who's your favourite royal person?
Princess Grace. She did amazing things. She managed to get out of the movies when she didn't really want to. And she wasn't in love with Raina, I don't believe. And she did what she did because she was needed, and she was amazing for him and for that family.
And incredibly beautiful.
Oh,
yes.
breathtaking.
Breathtakingly beautiful. Now, my last question that I always ask all my guests is, what's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor? But I don't know whether you're going to be able to narrow it down to one, because you don't get off the dance floor, do you?
We dance every dance.
Well, what's your favourite song to dance to?
Well, I could tell you my favourite dance to. But as far as a favourite song, I don't think I have, mainly because I suppose when there were bands out and everyone was doing that, I was off working, and so I didn't have a chance to. I wasn't into bands, and I wasn't into songs, and quite frankly, I'm not now either. It's just that I just love to dance.
So when they play Save the Last Waltz for Me or one of those ones, you and Mr. Number 6,
my beautiful man.
Yeah, you're always your favourite song that you.
I love dances and songs where we can be close.
That might be a perfect ending to a lovely interview. Velvet Amour.
Thank you, Megan.
I suspect that there's a whole lot more that if I got My Bare Lady, your book, we might hear a little bit more of the detail there. But
yes, indeed.
I think it's been a fascinating interview, and I thank you for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk.
Thank you. I've got a lot of people who've read the book and rave about it, so they can't put it down.
There you are, folks. My Bare Lady by Velvet Amour.
If you or someone you know is at risk of experiencing domestic, family, or sexual violence, help and support is available by contacting the following services: 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or 1-800-RESPECT.org.au.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.